For the 2024 Six Nations, is it a new era for Ireland and for France? That's open to your interpretation. The reason I ask is because I think you look at a lot of the other teams in the Six Nations and you can understand how that would be the case. Wales under Warren Gatland are still in a rebuilding phase, looking to build towards the future. England, despite coming third at the World Cup, still a huge amount of questions about that team and how they look to build on what they did in France at the World Cup. Scotland likewise was a bit of a non-event for them in France because they were in such a tough pool, and Italy would be pretty disappointed as well. So for the other four teams in the competition, I think where they go from here, it feels like a new era. It feels like moving forward. Is that the case for Ireland and France? Welcome back to the channel. You can let me know. Part of the reason I'm doing this video is because I was so busy last week with all the squad announcement, I didn't get a chance to do one specifically for Ireland or for France. That was a little while ago now. I don't think there's too much point in me going through those two squads, but I wanted to do something on both of those teams because they are intriguing when we look ahead to the Six Nations and just where they are heading into it. So Ireland fans, French fans, comment down below, let me know what you make of it. Like the video and all that, subscribe to the channel. But is it a new era? Well, when I look at these teams following that World Cup, they both lost in a quarter-final, which, given their aspirations coming into it, is easy to label it as a failure. I don't think either of them were failures. I think they were two ridiculously good quarter-finals, which could have gone either way, and on the day, both of those sides were just beaten by the better team. And for me, it feels like they're kind of continuing what has already been built. It doesn't feel as much of a line in the sand as it does for some of those other teams. And that's why I feel it's probably not a new era for either of these sides. It doesn't mean they don't face their challenges, but I just think it means the perspective of where we are now alters. We all talk about the four-year cycle, and I know to a degree we get sick of that. It's about the here and now. It's about this Six Nations. It's not about building to Australia in 4 years' time. And for these teams, I think that's particularly prevalent because what they have been doing over the last, 4 or 5 years now has been working. It got themselves in a great place. Yes, they didn't quite get over the line when it came to the World Cup, but it doesn't mean it's a new era in the way it was a new era. I think if you look back 4 years ago, following the World Cup in Japan, for both France and Ireland, it did feel like a new dawn, a new team, new coaching staffs. This feels kind of similar. And I think it should be that way. I think you look at what Andy Farrell has done at Ireland and the brilliant job he's done there. It was really interesting actually being in Paris for those two quarterfinals and the mood and feel in the Ireland press conference after they'd lost to New Zealand. And there was a sense of obviously huge disappointment, but also what a great journey they had been on, and I think this is a continuation of that. For France, it's slightly different because I think with a home World Cup, your focus is always concentrated in a way that that's such a great opportunity for them to win a World Cup at home, but it's still the same coaching team. I'll come on to the players because they are missing a lot of players at the moment, but it's still a squad packed full of quality that you feel can build upon what has already been there. So that's my kind of initial thoughts. I think it is different for Ireland and France compared to some of those other nations in the Six Nations in terms of feeling like a new era, if that makes sense. So let's talk about Ireland specifically. I'm really intrigued from Ireland fans what you make of when you look at that squad that Andy Farrell picked. Some players coming back in, the likes of Jordan Lama and Cian Healy. Some players perhaps missing out on opportunities. But overall, I think a relatively settled Ireland squad. I suppose the big question mark from my point of view, which is the obvious one, but it's pretty big shoes to fill when you have Johnny Sexton retiring, is what happens at fly half. Crowley looks to be the favourite and the front runner at this time. I know they have some injuries in that department, but is that the right call? Is he the man to lead Ireland? It was always a thing throughout the career, pretty much, of Johnny Sexton, certainly once the 10 shirt became his own, of who was the guy coming up beneath him. And there were various different players. They never quite found it. So it's an opportunity for someone to really take that shirt by the scruff of the neck and make it their own. And how they fit into the Ireland system will be fascinating. I think The great thing about Andy Farrell and what he's doing is you do feel like they will be able to bring someone in, and they're not going to be the same player Johnny Sexton was, obviously, because he was a legend of the game, but they are going to be able to fit into that system, which could get the best out of them and still be effective in running that Ireland attack. The other thing that I think was really interesting with the team and the squad that Farrell went with is Peter O'Mahony as captain. And most people, I think, would probably say it's not the long-term option. I don't think it's a captain that you're naming thinking he's definitely going to be there in 4 years' time. In fact, O'Mahony himself admitted that he considered retiring after the World Cup. But I think it's classic Andy Farrell in a way, in that he doesn't overthink it, he doesn't overcomplicate it. He's looked at that and said, right here, right now, this Six Nations, who's the best man for the job? And you can understand why he would arrive at Peter O'Mahony, 100 capper, been there and done it, been pretty much an ever-present in Andy Farrell's squads, certainly over the last few years. And it is Farrell once again saying, we are here to win this Six Nations. This is not about building for a World Cup in 4 years' time. I think that's exciting. I really like that. I've seen some people in Ireland suggesting that they'd like to see maybe someone that is going to have the captaincy over the next 4 years, but I think it makes a huge amount of sense. As for France, as I've hinted out already, injuries and absentees really, I think, is the most fascinating thing about this French squad. So obviously Dupont not there because he's training for the Sevens. You've then got Untermack injured, Jelonch who has got another injury. Gutted for him, by the way. Picked a really bad injury up. He returned from that knee injury and he's got injured again. Miafu, Flamont, Cretin and Crow, all players that are missing for France. But I don't think it should matter too much. I think the one thing with France that we've seen over the last 4 years, I suppose, has been the strength in depth in that team. I think it's going to be the case again. I mean, look, Antoine Dupont is the best player in the world, but Maxime Lucu and Mathieu Jalabert, who are the favourites to start at 9 and 10, are playing unbelievably well for Bordeaux. Any of you who've watched them in the Champions Cup will testify to that. So I think they will have players that come into these various different positions and step up. And even in the back row, when they lost Jelonch, you think, oh, it's a huge blow, which obviously it is because he's a great player, but you've got Cameron Wackey who can play second row or back row. They have other guys who've stepped up to play in those positions. Gregory Aldrit gets the captaincy, which I think is a great decision. Olivon, I think, probably would have been the captain, but he seems like he's touch and go for their Six Nations opener, so that's the reason it goes for Aldrit. But where is this French squad in terms of the strength and depth it has? How big a emotional blow was that World Cup quarter-final at home? I think they'll be all right, but those are maybe some questions that you could ponder. The other thing about France, actually, for this tournament, which I'm really excited about, is the show goes on the road. They're not at the Stade de France. That is getting prepared for the Olympics later this year. So they're in Marseille, they're in Lyon and Lille as well, I think is their other game. So they're taking it all around the country. That stadium in Marseille, I think that will have a better atmosphere than the Stade de France, in my opinion. Having been there at the World Cup, that stadium is awesome. Great city as well. Quite easy to get to the stadium from like the central port where everyone will be drinking. I think that's going to be really exciting. And I'm excited to see how France get on. And when we talk about these two teams, in a similar fashion to the Six Nations last year, do you think the title comes down to the opening Friday night? Is the opening game of this Six Nations going to decide the title? France against Ireland on that Friday night in Marseille. It makes a lot of sense why people would say it will, and whoever wins that will be the heavy favourites. But we'll wait and see. Momentum can be a funny thing in the Six Nations. I still look at England, and I know there's a lot of question marks over England. They need to develop their attack. There's all sorts of things they need to do. But if they could get to that Ireland game, hosting Ireland at Twickenham, if they're still unbeaten, if that Twickenham crowd can really get behind the team and make it a tough place to go, which it used to be, it hasn't been recently for England, then you never know. That's my point. Warren Gatland made this point as well, and he is the expert of this over his career. You can win Six Nations, not necessarily by being the favourites at the start, by building momentum and riding that momentum throughout the tournament. So, yeah, Ireland and France will be the favourites. Whoever wins that game on the opening night will be the heavy favourites. I think most people would view that as their Six Nations to lose. Do you think there's anyone else that can challenge them? I don't know. I think it's unlikely, if I'm being completely honest. But stranger things have happened in this competition, particularly Six Nations off the back of World Cups. And actually, talking about Ireland, defending Grand Slam champions, I need to double check this. I don't think a side has gone back-to-back Grand Slams in the Six Nations era. I think you have to go back to the Five Nations with France for the last time that a team won back-to-back Grand Slams. Not an easy thing to do. That's the challenge for Andy Farrell's team. So what do you think? New era for Ireland and France, or more a continuation of what these coaching groups and what the bulk of these players have been doing over the last 4 years? That's what I think. You can comment down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one.